Come to the statement. Minister Daniel Zeichner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, I'd like to update the House on the sustainable farming incentive. We stand on the edge of an unprecedented global transition for British farming. From leaving the European Union to the challenges of climate change and geopolitical events, we are asking more of farmers than ever before. To continue to produce the food that feeds the nation and protect the environment on which our long-term food security depends. And we are determined to create the conditions for farm businesses to be profitable and succeed. Now, we're proud to have secured £5 billion for farming over 2 years, the largest budget for sustainable food production in our country's history. That's £1.8 billion for customers already in agreements, £1 billion for farmers who are now in SFI agreements, and a further £150 million for farmers in the SFI pilot. And Labour has got that money out of the door and into farmers' pockets. We've invested to bring thousands more farmers into the ELM schemes, which I'm afraid were vastly underspent by the previous government, to make a record number of capital items available for the coming year to help farmers carry out actions under the SFI and countryside stewardship, with £600 million available for productivity, animal health and welfare innovation and other measures to support agricultural productivity, as well as 50 landscape recovery projects across the country. And we've responded directly to calls from the sector to roll out a new higher tier scheme and to increase payment rates so HLS agreement holders, many of them upland farmers, are fairly rewarded for their work. So we now have more than half of all farmers in schemes, 37,000 live SFI agreements, 50,000 farmers in ELM agreements. Under the SFI, 800,000 hectares of arable land being farmed without insecticides, 300,000 hectares of low-impact grassland managed sustainably, and 75,000 kilometres of hedgerows being protected and restored, which is a huge success for nature. And I want to thank all the farmers involved and to reassure them that all existing SFI agreements will be honoured. Farmers will continue to be paid under the terms of their agreement for its duration. If they entered into a 3-year SFI agreement earlier this year, they will be paid until 2028. If they submitted an SFI application but this has not yet started, that will also be honoured, and all farmers who took part in the SFI pilot will be able to apply for an agreement. But the fact is, the high uptake of the scheme means it is now fully subscribed. Now, I'm afraid as a government, we inherited SFI with no spending cap, despite a finite farming budget, and that cannot continue. So we will continue to support farmers to transition to more sustainable farming models, including through the thousands of existing SFI agreements over the coming years and a revamped SFI offer. But this is an opportunity to improve how we do that under a fair and just farming transition. A transition that supports farms to be profitable businesses in their own right, through fairer supply chains, better regulation and greater market access, and that directs public funding in a fair and orderly way towards the priorities we have set out on food, farming and nature. So we will be strategic in how we design our schemes and responsible within the budget we have available. This is about using public money in a way that supports food production, restores nature and respects farmers as the business people they are. SFI can and must work better for all farms and for nature, and I will set out the details of the revised SFI offer following the spending review, including when it will open for applications. We will work closely with the sector to design an improved scheme so they can tell us what works best for their businesses. We'll also put in place strong budgetary controls so that SFI is affordable to the public purse. The revised offer will align with our land use framework to better target SFI actions fairly and effectively, focusing on helping less productive land contribute to our priorities for food, farming and nature. But the underlying problem facing the sector is farmers do not make enough money, and the government is changing that. We announced the members obviously may laugh, but actually businesses do need to make money. They might need to know that. So we announced a new set of policies at NFU conference last month aimed at improving farm profitability, securing our food security and protecting nature. And through our farming roadmap, we're creating the conditions for farmers to run profitable businesses that can withstand future challenges. This decision is about investing in long-term stability. It's about a future where farmers are supported to run profitable businesses, where public money is used in a better way to better restore nature and to secure long-term food security.
Yeah.
Shadow Secretary of State Victoria Atkins.
Well, may I thank the Minister for an advance copy of his statement, which I'm going to pull apart in a moment. May I thank you also, Mr Speaker, for granting the urgent question that forced the Minister to the dispatch box, because they sneaked this statement out last night, presumably hoping nobody would notice. But guess what? The countryside has. Because the question that we are all asking ourselves is, what has this government got against farmers and the countryside? They sneaked this announcement out that they were halting the Sustainable Farming Incentive Scheme immediately. This scheme replaced the EU's Common Agricultural Scheme when we left the EU. We set up this scheme with our Brexit freedoms to establish a farming policy that works for farmers, the environment and food production. Yet Labour pulled the plug without warning last night. This scheme is popular with farmers, and he doesn't have to take my word for it. To quote one, these schemes have the potential to be the most progressive and environmentally responsible schemes of their kind anywhere in the world. Those were the words of the former president of the CLA and father of the honourable member for Mid and South Pembrokeshire, who I'm sure will agree with his father's own analysis. Why then would this city-dwelling government stop such a successful scheme? In the word of the CLA president, Victoria Vivian, of all the betrayals so far, this is the most cruel. It actively harms nature, it actively harms the environment, and with war once again raging in Europe, to actively harm our food production is reckless beyond belief. Does the Minister think she's wrong? And yet, despite this, the Secretary of State, who, by the way, is missing in action, this is a significant statement which he has made, and he's sending out his junior minister to take the heat. Perhaps it's because the Secretary of State didn't want me to remind him of his own words in November, which was, he said, that farmers feel ignored, alienated and disrespected. Well, I do hope the Minister is going to be telling us how that's going now. The farming policy of this government can be summarised in 3 sentences. They will halt any farming and environmental scheme on which farmers rely without warning, without consultation, and using criteria they have never before defined. The state will seize their farmland at will through the compulsory purchase orders that were announced yesterday in the planning bill. And if families have managed to cling on to their farms despite all of this, then Labour will tax them for dying. But I'm delighted to hear that the Farming Minister himself conceded that farmers don't make enough money, so I hope that he's going to be changing the family farm tax. This adds up to nothing less than an outright assault on the countryside. As a proud rural MP, someone who actually likes the countryside, I'm already being contacted by constituents and farmers across the United Kingdom who have had the door slammed in their face with no notice and asking how they are meant to diversify, make a living and protect our countryside. Now, the Prime Minister said he understood the significance of losing a farm, acknowledging it can't come back, and warned against constantly moving the goalposts for the agricultural sector. Yet this is exactly what his government is doing. The statement issued by the government last night was a masterclass in Orwellian doublespeak. It says the SFI scheme has, I quote, reached completion. Well, what criteria has the government used? Because it hasn't set those criteria out before. The government's own website stated that up to 6 weeks' notice would be given for the withdrawal as SFI. Why was this disregarded last night? And how does he recognise that by doing so, this government has betrayed trust in the farming community yet again? How many farmers does his department believe will now be caught out without an SFI agreement during the transition period of at least a year? And just as with the family farm tax, Labour has got its figures wrong. The CLA has asked me to ask the Minister what his government's ambitions are now for the 2/3 of farmers in England who are not currently in environmental schemes. How much have the vast cuts to BPS payments saved his department, and where has that money gone? And how will the Secretary of State support upland farmers who were intending to move on to the sustainable farming incentives? And then, of course, there's the legal problems that this announcement last night has caused. How will the government meet its legally binding environmental targets, given they rely so heavily on the SFI scheme? And I do hope the Minister is going to be able to give us a good, clear legal analysis on the impact of changes to SFI on internal market competition law between England and other devolved authorities as a result of this change. Now, any words that the Minister uses about food security are meaningless in the face of this policy, particularly as we all know that this government has been delaying consideration and grants of these applications since the general election. So the figures he is using are wrong. The theory behind this policy is very questionable, and yet the government would have us all believe that he understands farming and the impact that this will have on farmers. They are in despair. And so my message to farmers is clear. We have got your back. We will please help you to hang on in there for the next 4 years. We will axe the family farm tax and we will sort out this shocking mess of SFI to help build a bright future for British farming with British farmers.
Minister.
Well, really, I'd hoped that the Secretary of State would actually understand the way the schemes her own government created actually work. The problem we faced when we inherited, and there are others on her front bench who I think understand this better, will know that this time last year, these schemes were undersubscribed. They are now oversubscribed, and it's not a complicated thing to say that when the budget is spent, a responsible government responds to that. The budget is spent. The budget has been spent, and what we are doing in a sensible, serious way. The honourable members opposite should actually be celebrating the success of the fact that so many farmers are now in these schemes and taking them up. So I am absolutely confident that we will be able to sort out the mess that we have inherited. But basically, if you set up schemes without proper budgetary controls, you end up in this kind of position. We have had to take the hard decision that the previous government ducked.
Jayne Kirkham.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Could the Minister confirm that ELM's scheme agreements will remain in place under this Labour government, including SFI, and there will be a new and better targeted SFI on offer as soon as possible, with details to follow in the spending review?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for her question. It's absolutely the right point, and that's what we should be doing, reassuring people out there that people who are in schemes absolutely safe, absolutely carrying on as before. But the basic point is that when a scheme is full, it's full.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Tim Farron.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank the Minister for sight of his statement in advance. The closure of the SFI from 6 p.m. last night came without warning or consultation, and it constitutes the breaking of the government's word to farmers. Farmers are already losing their basic payment this year, but are now excluded from the very scheme designed to replace that. Hasn't the Minister then broken his word to farmers and to all who care about nature? Will he clarify how much money he will save from the BPS cuts this year, and that therefore it is not true that SFI is overspent? Isn't it true that when the BPS cut is taken into account, more than £400 million of the £2.5 billion farming budget will remain unspent? A bigger budget is pointless if you do not spend it. This money was supposed to reward farmers for nature restoration and sustainable food production. Doesn't this damage both? There are 6,100 new entrants to SFI this year, and yet only a mere 40 of them are hill farms. Doesn't this prove that, because of the failure of the Conservatives in the last administration, the big landowners and the corporates are already comfortably inside the tent, but the farmers who are outside and now locked out without warning are Britain's poorest farmers in Britain's most beautiful places like mine in the lakes and the dales? As the Tories oversaw a 41% drop in hill farm incomes in just 5 years, isn't this a bitter blow that is unbearable for our upland farmers? This betrayal will outrage everyone who cares for our environment, for our upland nature and landscapes. It will outrage everyone who cares about food security. It will outrage everyone who cares about our tourism economy, and it will outrage everyone who clings to that old-fashioned expectation that governments should keep their word. On Monday, the Secretary of State came to my beautiful constituency to pose for pictures by Windermere. I wonder whether he might come back tomorrow and face up to the farmers who steward the stunning landscapes around our beautiful lakes and who he has abandoned so shamefully. Will he reopen SFI, honour his promises, or else turn his back on the very people who feed us?
Minister.
Well, again, I'm disappointed in the honourable gentleman's comments because he is a thoughtful person and he and I have debated these issues many times. I'm sorry he didn't welcome the uplift in HLS payments, which he and many others have been asking for a long, long time, which will benefit upland farmers. And I would take him back to many of the discussions that we have had about the importance of getting the farm budget out to farmers. That is what has happened. The full budget is actually being spent, and that should be celebrated.
Alex Sobel.
The fruit and vegetable aid scheme is an important lifeline for producers collaborating, and it has meant that we've had a huge increase in our tonnage of various fruit and vegetables. That scheme is finishing on the 31st December 2025. What future plans have we got to support fruit and vegetable producers to collaborate in 2026 and beyond?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for his question. It's an important one. That is, of course, an EU legacy scheme, and we're considering the best way of taking that forward in future, but we're absolutely committed to supporting and working with the horticultural sector.
We have around 35 minutes remaining. Questions have to be short and the Minister's response has to be on point and tight as well. Follow the House, Edward Leigh.
Will the Minister leave for a moment the hallowed cloisters of Cambridge and accept my invitation to take a rural ride through Lincolnshire, the breadbasket of England, to meet my farmers? Does he agree that sustainable farming is the key to food security, and therefore will he take up with his colleagues in the Department of Net Zero why they are covering 15% of Lincolnshire with solar farms, in addition to taking away this grant?
Minister.
Well, again, I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for his question. I'd always be happy to visit Lincolnshire. I've done it on a number of occasions. But on the question of how we allocate our land, of course, it's very important that we make sure that the new land use framework works effectively, because that's the most rational way of making those decisions.
Julie Minns.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's extremely welcome that under this government more money has been spent on schemes and more farms are in schemes than was the case under the last government. However, there are smaller farms like those in my constituency of North Cumbria who would not have had their plans as far advanced as their larger neighbours, along with their consultants. Can I ask him to outline what support will be available to those smaller farms going forward?
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend, because she absolutely touches on the critical point. The schemes we inherited had no way of prioritising properly. It was a first-come, first-served scheme. So the kind of farmers that she's describing were disadvantaged. Now, we've had to work with a scheme that we inherited. We were very clear when I took over that we were not going to immediately overturn the existing system. We wanted to give people confidence about the future, but when we come to redesign the scheme, we can design it better to address the issues that my honourable friend has raised.
Chair Alistair Carmichael.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I note the Minister's complaint that he inherited an uncapped budget. Can he tell the House, is this something that he just noticed on Monday, that he had to close the scheme without warning on Tuesday? On the 14th of January, the Director-General from his department in charge of food, biosecurity and trade told my select committee, "I do not think we can expect that every single farm will be viable, but if we are talking about 92–93% having the opportunity of productivity improvements, that's what we are aiming for." In other words, the government's aim is to lose 7 to 8% of our farms. What will that figure be after today's announcements?
Well, I'm always grateful for questions from the right honourable gentleman who chairs the Select Committee. Those figures on future farm viability, of course, go all the way back to the Agriculture Act, where there was a serious attempt made to assess future farm viability. Now, this is why the Secretary of State and I are so determined that we absolutely address those problems around farm viability. They're not going to be supported forever by the public purse. We know that. So it's very important that we address all those range of issues, but I'm very happy to have a further conversation with him.
Sam Rushworth.
shares with me a wish to see a bit more humility from the party opposite, given their failure to get the agricultural budget out of the door. But I would ask the Minister to please, if I could hear myself think a moment, Madam Deputy Speaker, if I could hear myself think, I would ask the Minister to ensure that every penny in SFI arrangements will be paid to farmers, but also that those who've already applied and who are eligible will have their applications taken forward.
I thank my honourable friend. I very much enjoyed visiting his constituency and talking to farmers there about these issues, and I can actually absolutely give him that commitment.
Wendy Morton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. For those who have farming businesses, how does the Minister expect them to plan for the future when he sneaks an announcement out, like his department did last night, despite a message on his website saying we would give you 6 weeks' notice of any closure? What does he have against our farmers and against our food producers?
Well, the only thing I've got anything against is the previous government who set this scheme up in the first place and set it up in a way in which SFI 22 was closed in exactly the same way, SFI 23 was closed in exactly the same way, SFI 24 is only different in one sense, in that it is now oversubscribed rather than undersubscribed, and as a consequence it would not have been possible to give notice because it would have led to a further spike in applications.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As the Minister has just alluded, it's called SFI 24. Might that be a clue in the title, and therefore it's perhaps less surprising than people are saying, given that it's now 2025?
Well, I'm grateful to my honourable friend, and she makes a very sensible point, which is that we saw a succession of schemes announced by the previous government. What I want to get to is a scheme that will work for the long term. And she's absolutely right that I'm afraid the way it was set up by the previous government, it was first come, first served.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And the overnight withdrawal of this funding is yet another blow against many of my farmers in King Swinford and South Staffordshire. The Minister still hasn't answered why he has broken his word that was clearly set out on the government website to give at least 6 weeks' notice, nor the chair of the Select Committee's question about if the reason for doing so was because the budget had become exhausted. When did that first come to his attention? Was it really yesterday afternoon?
Well, it first came to my attention 5 years ago during the passage of the Agriculture Act when I warned exactly that this would happen, because if you move from a basic payment system where everyone has an entitlement to a system that is based on bidding, this is what happens. So perhaps he should have woken up 5 years ago.
Cat Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Minister for coming to the House to make the statement. However, I did wake up this morning to many emails in my inbox from farmers across Lancaster and Wyre, and I would like to invite the Minister to join me, because I'm going to accept the invitation from my constituent Kath to visit her farm, because she was in the situation of her SFI application was ready to go. She's coming out the countryside stewardship agreement, so therefore she's been left in limbo, and I wondered if whether or not he would join me in meeting farmers across Lancaster and Wyre.
Minister.
Well, as I've said to many honourable members, I'm always happy to try and meet farmers whenever I can, and I'll add her to my list. But I absolutely understand the point she is making, but this was a fundamental problem with the schemes as designed that we have inherited. We need to do better in future, and that is what we will do as we redesign it.
Andrew George.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. What assurance can the Minister give farmers in my constituency, which were recently designated a triple SI in the Penwith area, as well as being supported, of course, by a recent designation of landscape recovery as well? Now they seem to be in a position where there's going to be no support for it at all. How are they going to adjust to this new regime, and what assurance can he give my farmers that the funding will be in place to support their actions in the triple SI?
Minister.
Well, there's some complexity in that question which I might need to address directly with the honourable gentleman, but landscape recovery is absolutely not affected by this, so it depends upon the exact nature of the application.
Campbell-Savers.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can the Minister confirm more about the timetable for SFI 25 to provide some reassurance to my farmers in Penrith and Solway that we are going to deliver? And can he also explain a little bit more about how we ensure that more of my hill farmers get into the SFI scheme, which the last government failed to deliver on?
Minister.
As I said, I'm grateful to my honourable friend for his question. It's an important one because we will be working with farmers and organisations to redesign the schemes to address that very question. Now, that will be taking place over the summer this year. And we'll, obviously, once we've had those conversations, we'll be able to announce exact timings. But he's absolutely right to raise the point that there has been no fair allocation of resources. It has been just on a first-come, first-served basis.
Charlie Dewhurst.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Now, the Minister's own statement here says this decision is about investing in long-term stability. First, we've had the body blow of the family farm tax. We've had the reduction in BPS. We've had the pulling of capital grants. And now the cancellation of SFI. How is any farming business expected to invest in the long term?
Minister.
The honourable gentleman is a sensible person who had many discussions with him over the years. When he says pulled, what he means is the budget was completed. And it's exactly the same in this case. And I do think it's important that honourable members opposite understand that you can't spend the same money twice. Now, they lived in a world of cakeism. We don't. And the money is spent. Once it's spent, you then have to move to a new set of schemes when you have the money available.
Andrew Pakes.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Minister for bringing the statement to the House and sharing such honesty about challenges in the scheme. Can I urge the Minister not to take any lectures from the party opposite, who oversaw a chaos in DEFRA and a £300 million underspend, a shameful record? And can I ask the Minister if he can assure the House and outline details to ensure that future schemes gets the money out the door, gets it into farmers' pockets and stops the waste and bureaucracy we've seen under the previous government in DEFRA?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. I'm afraid I was genuinely dismayed by what I found when I came into the department, perhaps not entirely surprised, but we have spent the last 6 or 7 months trying to get control of this, because if you have a scheme which is not capped, not managed, no budgetary control, then you have a problem. The figure's £5 billion overall, the biggest amount for farming that we've had. We're going to make sure the money gets out to farmers.
Sarah Dyke.
Speaker, coming at a time of record low confidence in farming, many farmers in Glastonbury and Somerton will feel that this sudden closure of the SFI scheme will bring them closer to closing their farm gates for the very last time, at a time when food security is at an all-time low. So what communications are going to affected farming businesses, and what support will DEFRA give to those that are dealing with vulnerable farmers at the sharp end?
Well, I have to say I don't actually agree with some of the honourable lady's question, because the food security report that was published at the end of last year did not bear out her analysis. But the RPA has written to farmers today, setting out exactly the situation to give people reassurance.
Whereas, Madam Deputy Speaker, is the Minister surprised that the party opposite is now crying crocodile tears when they failed to get £350 million of SFI out into farmers' hands, and they failed to stop speculative acquisition of farmland by tax dodgers?
Minister.
My honourable friend is absolutely right. I'm afraid, as on so many other issues, we're having to clear up the mess that we inherited, and it will take time, but we are setting out a clear path for the future, which I hope over time people will come to support.
Paul.
I don't know how to break this to the Minister, but I don't know if he realises, but when the thousands of farmers come to Westminster, they're not coming to thank him or the Secretary of State. Yesterday we had the sustainable farming incentive announcement. Today, an announcement that there is to be no extension to his honourable friend from Leeds, to the fruit and vegetable aid scheme, no extension to that. And that, of course, follows the family farm tax. The announcement which the Minister has made today speaks very ill of the financial management of his department. I make no apologies to repeat the questions asked by my right honourable and honourable friends. When did he know that he was hitting his budget ceiling? When had he set that as a criteria? What discussions had he had with the Treasury to increase the budget? And why was he deliberately, I presume, misleading farmers by pledging a 6-week notice period, and it wasn't even 6 seconds?
Just before the Minister responds, the honourable member, he knows that he cannot use the term deliberately misleading, so I'll ask him to withdraw that statement.
Inadvertently misleading. Inadvertently. misleading.
No. Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I will take the honourable gentleman back to the origins of this debate. When we moved from basic payments to these schemes, it was always the case that there were going to be a point where the budget was spent. So we've known it for 5 years. We've known it for 5 years. That would.
Terry Jeremy.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Having spent several weeks and months encouraging farmers to access this scheme, naturally I'm disappointed with the closure and hope that there will be a replacement in short order. But the fact that I can find so many farmers in my constituency and elsewhere that weren't accessing this scheme, is that not evidence of the party opposite failing farmers over so many years?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question. Actually, of course, the thing is that many farmers are now in these schemes and benefiting from them, and also we're getting the environmental benefits that the whole process of transition away from basic payments to the environmental land management schemes was designed to achieve. So let me pay some credit to the party opposite. They set this train in motion, essentially. But what they didn't do was set up the schemes in a way that could properly be managed, and that is what we are now doing.
Ellie Charles.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Yesterday, this government pulled the rug out from underneath thousands of farmers by cancelling the SFI with zero notice, shamefully, despite saying that they would give 6 weeks, but without putting in place anything to support farmers going into the future. My inbox this morning is full of emails from multiple farmers despairing, who were on the point of submitting an application, had no way of planning for this, and now are utterly left in the lurch. How does the Minister expect the UK to make that vital transition to nature-friendly farming, boosting UK food production, if this is how they treat farmers?
Well, absolutely astonished at the honourable lady's contribution. She should be celebrating the fact that so many farmers are now farming in an environmentally sensitive way. And I'd invite her to help us make sure that in future these schemes work better. But this is actually a cause for celebration about the benefits of these environmental land management schemes.
Chris History.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I've also been contacted by concerned and impacted farmers in North East Hertfordshire. Can the Minister assure me that the revamped SFI alluded to will allow farmers to plan seasons ahead over the remainder of this Parliament as they need to?
Minister.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for his question. Quite clearly, over the last 5 years, we have all known that this was a transition that was happening. There was always going to be a point in this transition when we moved from basic payments to environmental land management schemes where it would be down to people applying for these schemes. So I understand my honourable friend's concerns. What I would encourage farmers to do is apply early in these schemes. It was a first-come, first-served scheme before. In the future, we'll try and make sure there's a better process for allocating, but that's the system we inherited.
Adam Dance.
One of the key messages from farmers at my forum I held in my constituency, Yeovil, was that they have lost trust in this government and investing in sustainable farming. Does the Minister, recognising ending SFI with no warning has only worsened the loss of trust? And what plans does the government have to restore Yeovil's farmers' confidence in this government?
Well, I hear the honourable gentleman's question, but I would say that the fact that we've got so many people in agreements, so much land actually being farmed within these agreements, shows that many people in this country have absolute confidence in what we're doing.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. How on earth does the Minister correlate saying in his statement he wants to work with the sector when last night the government gave 30 minutes, just 30 minutes notice to the NFU, the sector, of this shameful cut to the SFI budget? What does that actually say about DEFRA's previous commitment to transparency, cooperation and co-design?
Minister.
Well, again, I'd say to the honourable gentleman that this has been a process going on for 5 years now, and that perhaps he should have looked a bit more closely at what was about to happen.
Carla Lockhart.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Minister, trust between farmers and this government is well and truly broken. Farmers feel betrayed, let down, and many are at breaking point. The closure of the SFI is a bitter and I believe a calculated blow on top of the family farm tax grab, and it will be the final straw for many British farmers, the people who feed us. How can the Minister justify sending over £500 million to farms in Africa, Asia and South America and stripping support for our own homegrown farmers?
Well, I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for her question, but I would just point out this is a scheme that relates to England, and the different devolved governments have different schemes. But in terms of the question about international aid, I would say that the key thing for us is to make sure that we support our farmers here, which is why we're spending a record £5 billion on farming over the next 2 years.
Martin Vickers.
The one thing in the Minister's statement that farmers in my Brigg-in-Immingham constituency would agree with is that they are not making enough money. When I hope the Minister takes up the Father of the House's invitation to visit Lincolnshire, will he agree to meet face-to-face with my farmers and explain to them exactly what his government are doing to increase their profitability?
Well, I'm grateful to the Honourable Gentleman. We've had many exchanges across the chamber over the years. I'd be very happy to speak to his farmers and particularly talk to him about the work we're doing on supply chain fairness, which is very important to me.
Helen Morgan.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Farmers in North Shropshire are really keen to improve the environment and farm in a friendly way, but they're also running businesses and they need to plan. There are farmers in my constituency who are hoping to apply for grants to raise the water table in peat soil areas. Those grants hadn't even opened, that's why they hadn't applied, and now the opportunity's gone. Can you tell us what he's going to do to enable farmers to plan and what the replacement scheme is going to look like?
Well, the Honourable Lady raises an important question. SFI is only one part of the set of schemes that the Department has to work with farmers on nature restoration, and my colleague is just telling me we're £300 million available for peat restoration, so there are other schemes available.
Dr Luke Evans.
No notice and the scheme immediately closed. The Minister says it's full, it's complete. When did he know this, and why didn't he tell the farmers it was going to happen?
Exactly.
I think there's still a misunderstanding about how these schemes work. If you have a first-come, first-served scheme, and people have known for weeks and weeks and weeks, months, that it would be full at some point. So there comes a point where you have to make a decision, and if you are working within your budgets properly, you can hardly say a week or two before that suddenly it's going to close, because you then get a spike in applications. It's like a run on a bank. I'm afraid, basically, when the scheme is finished, it's finished.
Ross Savage.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Nature and food, farming and farmers are the absolute foundation of British life in every sense, and this change is deeply regrettable. Can the Minister assure this House that every support will be given to farmers to adapt to these changes and to give them the help with the time, the technology that they don't have? They are already on their knees. Please, can the Minister assure this House that the necessary support will be given to stop them from buckling under the load of these successive changes?
Minister.
Well, I hear the Honourable Lady's question, but I'll just repeat to her. With 50,000 farmers in ELM agreements, the majority of farmers are already working with us to make that change to environmentally friendly farming. It was never clear how many of the overall numbers of farmers would make the transitions into the new schemes. Obviously, it's not a matter of compulsion. We invite people to apply, and they were invited to apply last year. When the new scheme comes along, I invite people to apply then.
Andrew Smith.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister is here, ducking and dodging questions like the Poundland Alistair Campbell at the minute. He started out with "we knew 5 years ago," then just very quickly it turned to just weeks ago. He said that this is cause for celebration. I don't think I'll be finding any of my farmers that will be celebrating this. And I would just like to say to the Minister, come and speak and say these things directly to farmers' faces and see the response you get rather than the comfort there. Do you really want to be a minister that much? You're willing to say such ridiculous things. You can find money for lots of other projects. So just simply come to Fylde and speak to the farmers.
Minister.
Well, I was going to say I was grateful for the question, but I'm not sure I was really. What I would actually like to do is to invite the honourable gentleman to come and talk to people who are engaged in nature-friendly farming, who benefit from these schemes and who are actually undertaking the transition that I would give the previous government credit for on starting out for. We wanted to move away from the common agricultural policy to a new system. That is what we are doing. The schemes weren't designed well enough in my view, and that is what we are now addressing.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I was contacted by the Great Big Dorset Hedge Initiative 3 weeks ago, who told me that capital grants under SFI had already been frozen. Can the Minister confirm when the decision to close was actually made, whether applications submitted will be granted and how long they'll have to wait? And as farmers are already obliged to improve hedges with more than 10% gaps under their agreements, how will they access funding to do so to enable their existing funding to be maintained?
Minister.
Well, the Honourable Lady raises an important set of points there. We now have 75,000 kilometres of hedgerow within these schemes. The basic point is that we have a fixed budget, and just as with the capital grants, when they're spent, they're spent. There will be another set of grants available in the future, and I'd invite her constituents to apply at that point. But what we cannot get away from is there is not an endless supply of money, and we have to work within the budgets.
Lewis.
I understand the Minister's point that it's been known all along that at some point the fixed budget would be exhausted. A simple question for him. On which day were ministers first informed that that budget had been exhausted?
Minister.
Well, we made the decision yesterday because we reached that point.
Caroline Morton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's beginning to feel a little bit like a game of top trumps between who can cause the most financial unpredictability to farmers, be it the botched Elms rollout or cancelling this scheme at a moment's notice. We know that half of Britain's fruit and veg farmers expect to go out of business, and the Minister has said that he will support farmers to be profitable through fairer supply chains. So could the Minister explain to the House what that is going to look like?
Minister.
Well, I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for her. That's a very big question. What I would point her to is the fair dealing clauses in the Agriculture Act, which were brought forward. Some of them in the dairy sector are already. We're working at the pig sector soon. Basically, sector by sector, we're trying to sort out the improvements that are needed to get fairness through the supply chain. It's a very big, difficult, complicated question, but it's essential for the future.
Deputy Brown.
The announcement sneaked out with no notice last night. The Minister will know, if he knows anything about farming, that farming takes months, if not years, to plan. Yeah. They had no notice of this. Will the Minister now tell us what is to replace it, when he's going to consult, and when it's likely to come into operation?
Minister.
I'm grateful for the question because it is what we will do is over the next few months, through the spending review, we'll be reviewing how we can improve the scheme to avoid the very quick point that he has just outlined, and that I'll be reporting back to the House later in the summer.
Ben Maguire.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Having met with young farmers at Duchy College in North Cornwall last week, it's clear confidence in the farming sector is at an all-time low, with many looking for alternative careers. With the government's hammer blow to SFI payments on top of the family farm tax, what plans does the Minister have to incentivise young people to get into farming? Now they face a huge tax bill upon inheriting their family farm and will no longer be incentivised for environmental stewardship and sustainable farming.
Well, I completely disagree with the premise of the question, as the honourable gentleman will probably realise, because he's right to say we need to get generational change into farming, and there are a number of ways in which that can happen. But no, I'm not laughing at it at all. It's a very, very serious point here. I am genuinely concerned about the future of the farming sector unless we get generational change. We'll be looking closely at how we can do that in future. But in terms of stability, having the £5 billion budget that we've secured was a very, very good first step.
Ms. Brown-Fuller.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My farmers in Chichester are exhausted with the ever-changing schemes and the time it takes to apply for those schemes. So imagine their surprise when they find out that the SFI scheme has closed, not with no notice, I think that's unfair, with 30 minutes notice given to the NFU as opposed to the 6 weeks that they were promised, and at a time when BPS schemes are significantly reducing. What communication and support is going to be given for those family farms that have missed out on this round of SFI funding?
Minister.
Again, I thank the Honourable Lady for her question. what I would say is that it should have been clear to people for a long, long time that this transition was coming, because that was the move away from a system based on entitlements for every farmer through the basic payment system to a system that relied on people applying to what was essentially a fixed budget. Now, I agree with her, and I agree with many of the other contributions, that the way the system was set up did not allow proper prioritisation or fairness in terms of allocation. That's what we would like to change in future, but that is the system we inherited. And I'm afraid that is where we are at the moment. But remember, the vast majority, or the majority certainly, are already in schemes. And for those that have not yet come forward, what I'd gently say for the future is the advice is probably for these kind of schemes, it's better to apply earlier rather than to wait.
Jeff Ackroyd.
The sudden completion of the SFI scheme will be a worry to many farmers and local people. I'm also very concerned by reports that if you were only given 30 minutes notice on such a huge change. Can the Minister assure my farmers that DEFRA will learn lessons from poor communication and lack of clarity that's plagued this scheme and other initiatives in the past to give them the confidence they need going forwards?
Well, let me perhaps repeat the point. This is not about communication. If you've got a scheme which has got a fixed amount of money in it and you suddenly say it's going to close in 2 or 3 weeks, then you will get a surge in applications and you'll have to close it the same day. So that is a flaw in the way the scheme was designed originally. We want to do better in future.
Danny Chambers.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. International events have pushed national security right up the agenda, and I'm sure we've got cross-party acknowledgement that food security is a vital part of national security. Given the changing geopolitical situation now, has there been an impact assessment on changes to farming budgets like this removal of SFI and other stresses on farming budgets and cash flow on our food security?
Well, the Honourable Gentleman makes an important point, and I would refer him back to the food security report that was published. But there's been no change to the amount of money available. The £5 billion budget is there. This is a discussion about who gets it.
John Milne.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can the Minister explain to my farmers in Horsham why he did not feel any need to have any consultation with any farming stakeholder in advance of this announcement?
Minister.
Well, again, I'd refer the Honourable Gentleman to the question that I raised earlier. It's first come, first served scheme. If you start having a consultation, everybody applies that day and you have to shut it at that point. This is a flaw in the way the scheme was designed.
Final question, Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister is much liked in this chamber, and we all know that. However, it is disappointing to hear of the pausing of a new application for sustainable farming incentives for farms in England. It is understandable, of course, that this would be seen as a betrayal to so many farmers. In Northern Ireland, agriculture support is different, but nonetheless, the central funding comes from this government centrally here. So can the Minister assure that funding for Northern Ireland farmers, which comes from here, will not be reduced or falter as a result of today's announcement, and steps will be taken to protect our agricultural industry and our farmers, which are the backbone of our economy? Thanks so much.
Well, I thank the Honourable Gentleman for his kind words, and I suspect we shall renew our acquaintance in Westminster Hall this afternoon. But I can assure him that this announcement will make no difference to the funding arrangements for Northern Ireland.
That concludes the